situation was pretty desperate. Like my mother and father were very poor people. Father was take any job that was going. A very talented man, could do anything. And my mother would take jobs washing for farmers and various other things. Any little job came up had to be done to provide for us lot. They'd go hungry themselves to feed us lot. Like.
Looking at today's people, it was slavery back then. Because my mother never stopped.
And people had a hard time to make ends meet because there was rationing on, and I never seen bananas and apples and things like that till we were growing up. Well, the country people had a different slant on life. Dublin people and country people were always at one another, you know, calling you a bogman or something like that, you know. That's typical Dublin, by the way. Different life altogether, you know.
We had some funny things we had done. Gerald was supposed to do a chicken one day. I was holding his legs, and Gerald was my mum had a billow which you had to chop the head off. And something happened, I don't know what happened, I let go of the legs, and the chicken ran all around me. Well, you should have heard the screams. And he went for a long while. I was screaming and all, I think, but even now I can see him, and his blood was pumping up. It was terrible. Oh, Ger got an awful hiding for that. My mum went ballistic.
But before I come here, there was trouble in Northern Ireland. And we had a curfew. We had to be home in our houses by 9 o'clock. That was scary. Yeah. Because the troubles were going on then.
You know, we were clothed and fed and stuff like that, but there was no work, like I say, so majority of people left Ireland for work, and obviously they came first and, you know, found the work and found the, you know, the living really, and then, you know, brought their family on from then on.
But it was sad because your best mates, every year there'd be one of them going away, you know. I had 15 mates and 13 of them went away. And I was the last, as I say.
We as a family got split up, you know. My brother went to America and joined the American Army. 2 of my sisters went to Scotland because that's where the work were. And 3 of us came here. I mean, I was 10 when I came here, but there was no choice. There was, you know, was the best way was to come here and make a life in Coventry, really, and that's where the work was.
We travelled over on the old Queen Maud, the Princess Maud as it used to be, and that carried cattle down below, and it had no stabilisers at that time. There were things you didn't know about, and it was packed, and the sadness of seeing the youth of Ireland saying goodbye, and they were broken-hearted, and they were coming over. Some of them had nobody to meet them, and maybe 10 shillings in the old money in their case or the pocket. Some even had empty suitcases.
The boats then were not like what they are now. I think it's imprinted in everybody's mind that came across that time. It was like a ruddy cork on the water, up and down.
Oh, they could hear the cows moving and cattle, whatever.
Oh, on the Princess Maud. A nightmare.
And we got to Snow Hill or New Street about 6 o'clock in the morning, and all these people were walking around. And I couldn't believe it that they're out and about at that time. And it was my first meeting with people of different races and cultures.
I walked around the station in Birmingham, New Street, went outside and had a look. I got the shock of my life with these black buildings because everywhere was covered with coal dust, you see. I hadn't seen any of that in Ireland.
I didn't usually get into Coventry at about 6 in the morning. I was so excited. I had never really been in a large city before, at night particularly. I mean, I never really went into Limerick at night. And it was all so new, and I was quite excited by it all.
You were seeing Coventry really grow in the early 1950s. Vast activity in the motor business, but also a lot of work in housing. We at that stage would be employing roughly 80, 90 people, and I would think at least half, if not more, of the workforce would have been Irish.
Most of the Irish have built the cathedral and that. And they built the ring road and they were all on the building trade and that, you know, the motorways and that.
The best legal exchange was your local pub, especially if it was a paddy pub, an Irish pub. And you were definitely, if you went in there, you'd meet somebody you knew, or you might have a mate which, and he would know somebody else. And of course, you would say, oh, this bloke was looking for the start. Do you reckon where you're walking, such and such a place, and he'd put you in the picture.
You didn't have a lot of cash to spare, because for a few years when I was here before my family came over, I used to send some money home to my mum, you know. Not much, but a few pounds at that time was worth a lot, you know.
When you got to a room, they used to, some of them, I know a lot of them, they used to work, go to the pub on the way home, go straight into the room, lie down on the night, get up, they wait to work in the morning. That's all they had, and some of them suffered for it later years.
It was a thriving place for working. I mean, you had the factories, you had the Jaguar, the Morris, the Standard, Massey Ferguson's, all it was Reynolds Chain, all these big factories. So there's a lot of employment.
And also, Jerry, the buses.
The buses.
There's so many Irish were bus drivers, and they had a conductor or conductoress.
Because don't forget, it was the car town then. The cars were being produced, everybody had a job.
Oh gosh, you could get a job anywhere, anytime.
When I walked down in the Humber, I walked down the factory and I saw these massive machines. I thought, what have I let myself in for? But very soon you learned how to use a micrometer or whatever, you know, and there was nothing difficult about it.
I noticed among the shop stewards in the machine division a number of Irish people, and they were absolutely amazing people. They got wonderful insight, and they got wisdom, and also an ability to laugh at themselves.
If you look at the offsprings of those people today, they've all gone to universities, etc. In different circumstances, they wouldn't have been in the factory, or they would have been in the management of the factory. So you had that influx which gave the dynamism.
And the majority of the nurses anyhow in Gulston Hospital at that time, 90% of them were Irish, because the matron would go over to the schools in Ireland to recruit the girls to come over. And most of them were interviewed at school, and then they just travelled to Coventry.
But there was such a shortage that it was like an opportunity for the girls to get a profession and work as well. They got paid for it. It wasn't much, but at least they got paid.
But it was hard work, because really you work 7 days a week. And in nursing in those days was hard physical work.
Until you were qualified, the matron took complete responsibility for the Irish girls in Coventry. If you didn't get to Mass on a Sunday, for some reason you stayed in bed, you didn't get to Mass, you were in the office. Nurse, why weren't you at Mass? She had spies everywhere. She knew exactly where you were. Why weren't you at Mass on Sunday? She wasn't even a Catholic herself.
But they were very strict, and especially living in the nurses' home, you had to be in by 11 o'clock, I think it was at night. If you wanted to be out after that, you had to get a pass and go to the night sister's office to show your pass very often. We didn't get passes, but we always arranged for one of our friends to leave the fire escape open, and we'd climb up the fire escape. And especially with the nurses' home being on the banks of the Sherborne, sometimes you had to climb along a little ledge to get in. I don't know how some of us weren't drowned in the in the river.
And then, of course, you know, the places in Coventry such as the Four Ps, Finbars, St Brendan's or the Kerrymans, Four Masters, all of these places were hives of of Irishness, if you like. You know, Friday, Saturday and Sunday night. If you didn't get in here at 8 o'clock, you didn't get a seat.
I never went dancing until I came to England.
Well, you made up for it then.
I did.
We had a great time in Coventry.
Yeah.
You could go dancing 3 or 4 nights a week, and all very well dressed. Coventry was noted for that, the way the youth dressed in at that time. Well, the dance you'd wear a suit, and the collar and tie, of course. That was for us anyway. The girls, well, some would wear as little as possible.
The mini skirts were
The
there.
mini skirt came, yeah.
And they all had the hair up and.
That was the style, the hair up.
Of course, Coventry had its own great Irish scene, the Bamba, and I played there many times. I supported Larry Cunningham there once upon a time. God rest his soul, he was legendary at the time. It would be like me working with the Beatles. He was so big. He had just come back, I think, 3 nights in Carnegie Hall in New York, sold out, and I'm on stage before him at the Bamba, as it was called then, with Gigi and all the gang on the door. God, the atmosphere and the stories.
I heard about this place downtown, the Bamba, on a Saturday night, this dance, and I was determined I was going to go. I was only 15. I remember I went in there and I sat down. I got there about 9 o'clock, and I sat there and there's nobody there. Nobody ever arrived till after 10 o'clock or half 10 when the pubs closed. And I got in there and this was just amazing. Just, they were all dancing and bopping and twisting and doing this, and I thought this was wow. So they had a late night bus that brought you home. So I got the bus home. I got in at 2 o'clock in the morning. The mother's sitting there worried to death where I'd gone. So she gets the sweeping brush. She gives me a good few clatters with the sweeping brush.
Bamba was a great meeting place for young Irish people, you know. After marriages in Coventry, from the Bamba or the Majestic or some of those places.
I went to the dance hall at the Bamba and saw this girl. I asked her out to dance and they made the date.
So I said to Josie, come along with me, because I can't remember what he looked like. And I don't want to stand there on my own. So I went up and I said, I think that's him. So I went off with him, and she went back to the nurse's home and she said, Mac's gone off with this fella and she's not sure whether it's the fella she's made the date with or not.
We've been together ever since.
Certain clubs, St Finbarr's and St Brendan's, I wouldn't know much about the people that own the other ones. But John Prendergast, when St Brendan's was in its infancy and had their place in Ford Street, John Prendergast would go down in the morning at the time that the train from Holyhead would be coming in, and if he spotted anybody in real need, he would help them. And I know Joe McCarthy did similar things for the Irish here.
I'm the chairman of St Finbarr's GAA, which is the Gaelic Athletics Association. I've been involved with the club since I was 12-year-old, so this will be my 30th year.
I've had many times now. I've played in Wexford, Tipperary, Clare, Cavan. We've been all over Ireland with teams, and we never got beat.
Brendan Harkin here is the chairman of Four Masters Gaelic Club, based in Coventry here for over 60 years. The club was originally founded in 1955 by a group of Donegal men who came over and set up and carried the name from the Gaelic Club in Donegal town. Over the years we've had numerous levels of success. We currently compete in Division 2 of the Warwickshire League and going from strength to strength.
Roger Cairns was formed in 1956 in Our Lady Assumption Hall in Tile Hill.
We're an outlet of culture for the Irish people landing in the city at the time, coming to rebuild the city. A lot of our players at the time would have worked around the construction industry, and we still have a very strong link with that construction industry with the players today.
We struggled through the late 70s and the early 80s, but with a lot of young lads, they helped us out, and eventually it was tough going, but we got there.
It really is keeping Irish culture alive in Coventry, the club at the moment.
And very much, I suppose, Irish life centred around the parishes as well. You'd meet at your local parish church on a Sunday morning and keep in touch with people. That was very much the centre of it.
Well, my very first impression of Coventry
was going to Mass on this first Sunday I was here, and I looked around me and I said, what part of Ireland am I in? All the voices.
Yeah, yeah.
Just Irish voices.
I suppose a lot of the parish priests in those days were Irish men as well. So, I mean, when they were talking, when they were preaching, they could relate to their congregation as well. So, because the congregation would have been predominantly Irish in some parishes.
And of course we had Monsignor Tom Gavin in here, and he was a family friend.
And when he was near retiring age, he came to Coventry to St Thomas More's, and he played rugby. He was really pleased about playing rugby for Ireland.
Oh, he loved
but it caused a lot of bother because what was he, the Cardinal in Ireland or the Archbishop didn't think a priest should play rugby. And the fun of it was his mother was on the bus on the way to the match, and she said, how is it going? And somebody said on the bus, the priest has just been knocked out. So he really enjoyed that.
While you were living in the UK, you were acutely aware of every atrocity that was committed was a piece of bad news. It also affected the community because the community would be ridiculed in certain areas. Oh, you're Irish. Look, we see it again now, don't we?
People called you Paddy, and my name was Paddy, but people called me Paddy. I said, do you know my name? They said, no. I said, don't call me Paddy. They said, what is your name? I said, Paddy. But you know, I changed my name to Pat. That was the reason I did, because I was, but it's like they could be talking to the dog, and they would call him, and that really, you know.
The majority of people came here, they integrated, they became valued members of society.
We had the great excitement in 1989. We had our first Irish Lord Mayor, Councillor Dave Cairns, and that was a wonderful experience and a wonderful time.
Coventry Irish Society, it was David Cairns, our first Lord Mayor. It was his baby. It was David's baby, David and Nancy.
When we first set up the Coventry Irish Society, as it is known today, it was a great deal of, there was a backlash there as well, because it wasn't easily acceptable to people who had done fairly well, Irish that is, you know, to accept that there were among them a great deal of people who hadn't done well.
A lot of people, a lot of people have benefited from Coventry Irish Societies, because there's a door you can open, if it's only to say hello, have a cup of tea and a chat. You know, there's wonderful people working there that know their business.
And the picture, I did say to them we would be a partnership. I made that in my inaugural speech, that we would be a partnership. And therefore I said to them before the photos were taken that we would want our picture together. But it's only when they sent me away, when I think I was in Moscow, they passed a resolution that they would not allow the picture. The Labour group, that is, these so-called enlightened Labour members, they wouldn't allow the dual photograph. Oh yeah, there's a gap there today.
He moved to Coventry because he felt he had been overlooked by the authorities in the Ulster Museum because of his association with Communists and Labour Party and Catholics and other undesirables. He eventually got a job as curator of the Herbert Art Gallery in Coventry. And this was actually one of the best things, as he himself acknowledged later, this was one of the best things that ever happened to him. He was the one who was going to build up the collection of paintings for the gallery, and he certainly set about it with great energy and determination. And when I was over to Coventry a few years ago to unveil a plaque, it was very interesting to me how many writers and artists came up to talk about how kind Hewitt had been, how generous. You know, obviously he had made a tremendous kind of impact.
As I'm here now over 50 years, and the dancing is still a big part of the Coventry Irish here. I was taught dancing in Finbars for 28 years, also in the Kerrymans for 25. At the moment, I hold the world title of winning the championships of 116 titles. I think the next nearest one is around 100. There was other schools here in Coventry that had successes as well. Marion Turley always had great dancers, and the Kildare School.
So my name is Kira Sexton and I have been dancing for 25 years. I started with the Marion Turley Academy of Irish Dance, and I was so fortunate when I was 19 to be accepted into a show called Lord of the Dance, and I've been touring the world for 10 years. I believe that I was meant to meet Marion and Mosheen, absolutely, and they were my inspiration for my competitive days, and I managed to win the World Championships 5 times. I honestly believe they're the best teachers in the world. Whenever I come home, my friends say, well, where do you want to go? It's always the Hersal on Craven Street, and it's always the 4Ps. I just don't go anywhere else because it's just home for me.
You go into the Hersal on a Tuesday night and you've magnificent music, absolutely magnificent, you know, and you've got the well-known to the little-known, all part of, and just enjoy, the session.
Coventry. The songs I first heard in Coventry being sung were songs I learned at school. You think, well, you learn at school, it's square, isn't it? I want rock and roll. And then the significance of these songs, they've stood the test of time. Sung for, in some cases, hundreds of years, 200 or 300 years. We still do them. Still in the repertoire.
Irish music is like such a rich palette of harmonics. Lovely. Well, to me it sounds very sincere. A lot of it is almost continuous and it flows. Plus the fact that the actual choice of notes sometimes make you think, oh, that's lovely.
And you do think, not so much now, but you think, well, what would my life have been like if we didn't move from Ireland? I don't know. I think I've been very fortunate that I met a wonderful husband. I've got a lovely family. I've got lovely grandchildren. So I class myself as very lucky. I often wonder how I coped with it, because I couldn't imagine that upheaval for my children, and especially the grandchildren, I think more so. I look at them now, I've got a grandson that's 9, and I thought I could never imagine just picking him up from all his family and friends and bringing them to another country.
Home for me is Coventry at the moment, yes.
I can't see me now moving.
Yes.
I suppose I have all the ambivalence of people born in another country who still feel every time I go back to Dublin, I know I'm a Dubliner.
I often say to any of our Polish friends that I meet, and I'll say, well, 60 years ago, I was an immigrant just like you.
Ireland is my birthplace. Ireland is a beautiful place. There's some beautiful people there. And that's always going to be the case. So what I do now as regarding the past, I try not to think about it. It's all been brought to the surface by coming here over the years. And I don't think about it too much.
I've always had a feeling, and I've heard this before, that Ireland exports young people. And that's where I felt. I was an export. And I lost all feeling for Dublin. Now I feel better about it, but at the time, because we were coming over here in the thousands, and it was a very sad time. Very, very sad time. I never knew Ireland like I should have known it.
I go back, on those times I've been back, when I have been back, I can't trace the people I grew up with. They go on, they're in various parts of Australia, United States, some are in Germany, one guy's in Holland, and nobody, contact has been lost. And that with regard to a couple of people, that really gets to me sometimes. I want to make contact with them. I want to find out what happened to them, how they get on. I had some good pals when I was a kid. There's some not so nice people as well, of course.
I watch all the football matches in Ireland and that sort of thing. You know, isn't it? Being an Irishman never left me. I thought it might, but it never did.
If you've got a view about Ireland, let you be young or old, them views will always stop with you. That's what I think, anyway.
My oldest son was 18 before he seen Ireland, and he didn't want to come back. He says, how did you leave a lovely place like this, Dad? He said, this is fantastic, but the country is gorgeous to look at. I appreciate it more now when I go back than I ever did when I lived there. But it was work. Make a living, you had to come. But I love going back there.
So I went there in 2005 after 24 years of not being there. And it was very emotional, actually, seeing the hills and everything. And, you know, the local glen, because it was called Glen Down, see. So quite emotional, but very nice.
I'd always think Ireland is home. I can't help it. But I accept very much what I got here.
Coventry is home.
Coventry is definitely home.
Definitely home. But I still...
We still have Irish hearts.
Still have Irish hearts as well. And I would say, I refer, oh yes, somebody will say, have you been home lately? I'd say, no, I haven't been home in a while.
Coventry felt like home since the first time I come to it. So that is my experience of Coventry anyway, and I still feel like home, so.
Well, do you know what? That's funny. You go to Ireland, I'm going home. You're coming back to England and you're going home. You probably heard a lot of people out saying the same thing. But there again, I think that's always home, isn't it? At the end of the day, I think that's home, Ireland.